Recovery Sort Of is a podcast where we discuss recovery topics from the perspective of people living in long-term recovery. This podcast does not intend to represent the views of any particular group, organization, or fellowship. The attitudes expressed are solely the opinion of its contributors. Be advised, there may be strong language or topics of an adult nature.
All right, welcome back. It's Recovery Sort Of. I'm Jason, doing not anything today, drug-wise.
I'm Billy. I'm a person in long-term recovery.
And we got, as if this won't be confusing because you're listening, another Jason on the show today. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
So our topic today is going to be changing sponsors, when to change sponsors, how you know it's time you need to change sponsors, something along them lines. But before we get into all that, I did want to throw out some thank yous. Julie, Sarah, we appreciate your continued support.
Yes, thank you.
The show is also brought to you by Julie and Sarah, so be nice to them. Dan reached out, and he said that the AA literature is so hard for him to understand too, but he was enjoying the way that we describe things, so rock on, Dan, because thou'st is amazingest. Autumn reached out. She said she really appreciated the grief episode. She was just talking about how, she's been through some grieving kind of times and could really relate to the fact that it seems like after a few weeks, it fades off of everybody else's mind, even though you're still going through that grief. Julie also reached out. She appreciated the grief episode. A lot of feedback on the grief episode. She said that usually in her experience, you go through life, you feel this grief, you feel it the way you feel it, you process it the best way you know how, but nobody ever fucking talks about it, and you have no clue if it's anything like others' experience, if you can relate into it, if you're doing it right, if you're feeling like nothing. And she really appreciated that Caroline was able to come on and share that, because it's kind of a personal thing that we don't talk about. And she felt like, okay, maybe I am doing this right, or I've been doing this in a way that makes sense. Somebody just by the letter C on YouTube thanked us for our continued content. They said that everybody kind of starts stuff and then fades off, and they really appreciated that we were doing it.
It's mostly because we're addicts and we never give up. We just keep fucking going until it goes off the rails.
How did addicts give up on recovery podcasts?
Right.
You're not real addicts.
Yeah, right.
Giving up. And maybe they're just not getting the instant gratification. And one of the things that I had noticed at the clarity statement episode is the main thing we get hit on for Google. Everybody wants to know about the clarity statement. So I don't know if people looking up the clarity statement are finding what they want in that episode or not.
Probably not.
I hope that episode doesn't suck, though, because that seems to be our exposure to the world is the clarity statement. So maybe we'll go back and make a better clarity statement episode.
I have to go back and listen to that episode.
I had no idea.
I know I would have bashed it.
I want to hear it now.
I hate the clarity statement, so.
Right, I think we did. I'm pretty sure we tore it up. So hopefully people buy into that. I bet all the people looking it up there are people looking to reinforce the clarity statement.
They're looking for some argument for it.
Where you're you're wrong. Fuck that clarity statement. All right, so anyway, back to our regularly scheduled idea for an episode today. So we have Jason on, and the topic is changing sponsors. So obviously, if you can take a little hint, he has changed sponsors at some point in his recovery, but I'm going to let him share a couple minutes of his experience and why, that qualifies him to be in here to talk about changing sponsors.
Hey, so it was something that I struggled with. It was like letting my wife know that I was wanted to have an affair on her or something. You know what I mean? I had such a great relationship with my sponsor. Are we going to say who my sponsor was?
You can say whatever you want.
So Jason was my sponsor, and Jason moved away, hour away, and when he told me, he said, I'm moving away. You're welcome to find another sponsor if you feel like that's something. I was like, no way. I had such a good relationship with him, and we had been through a couple steps together, and I was in love, you know what I mean? I love my sponsor. I truly felt like my sponsor was the greatest sponsor in NA, how we always say. Then the pandemic hit, you know what I mean? So, before we were still getting together at least once or twice a month, I would come up to his neck of the woods, or he would come down, and that was still filling my cup. You know what I mean?
Right.
Before he moved away, we were getting together minimum once a week to go out, and then once a week to our home group.
Yeah.
So like from twice a week to twice a month, which I was still content with. You know what I mean? But then the pandemic hit, and then I wasn't getting that, and like the camaraderie, you know. NA for me is like not just the meetings, it's also the fellowship. And like I enjoy fellowshipping with men, you know what I mean? Like I like going out with a group of men and like traveling and going to dinner and going to a cool meeting that we never hit. And we were big on that, you know what I mean? But when the pandemic hit, it stopped, you know what I mean? I was just I felt like there was a piece of my program was missing, you know what I mean? Like here I was struggling to find recovery because recovery was shut down. Zoom wasn't doing it for me. I know that's a broken record, but it really wasn't. I didn't enjoy it. It didn't do what I was looking for, you know what I mean? So, you know, prayer, I prayed on it for a long time, you know what I mean? Like I thought about it for a few months, and I really did pray on it. And I thought about a guy who, back even when I was completely content with my sponsor, man, that every time I heard him share, he really did something for me. I was like, man, if I ever had to change sponsors, I think I would choose that guy. You know what I mean? It was kind of like a little reservation I had about sponsorship. But I really started praying on it, and I was thinking about doing it, and then I went to a meeting away, and boom, there he was. And he just delivered this message to me that I thought, like, it was God showing me a sign. You know what I mean? Like, I had to make a decision. You know, my recovery is my responsibility. If I'm not getting what I need out of a certain relationship, then it's time to change. That's what my thought was.
Right.
And I had to do it. It was the hardest thing that I've done in recovery. No lie. And I still have an amazing relationship with my old sponsor, and probably still closer with him than I am with my new sponsor, just because of, you know, the time. It hasn't been an extremely long time. I don't know, 6 months maybe.
Something like that.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm being patient. Obviously, you know, we need to do things to bond over, you know what I mean? Preferably some steps, you know what I mean? And that's not where we're at yet. You know, I know that there's going to be some bonding that comes along with that. Like last weekend, me and my new sponsor went on an amazing trip for the weekend. It was like a whitewater rafting trip, and we spent a ton of time together. Lots of God moments throughout the weekend, and the relationship is growing, you know what I mean? And I am happy with it. Do I have second thoughts sometimes? Yeah, like I still think about, this isn't working for me. I want to go back to Jay. You know what I mean? Because I love how he thinks. You know what I mean? Like he thinks about things differently than I do. You know what I mean? Like thinks outside of the box. Like I could be thinking about a subject in recovery and just have my opinion. And then I run it over with him, and he just brings something like, wow, I never would think about it like that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that. And I still get that out of our relationship now. Now that he's not my sponsor, we're going out once a month again.
Now I feel like I'm getting used.
Hey, but you know, I realized today that like he's there for me no matter what. Whether we call him my sponsor, you know, we're friends still. We still reach out to each other. He's somebody that I thoroughly respect in the program, you know what I mean? And when I bounce things off of him, he gives me an honest answer, and I don't have to call him my sponsor, you know what I mean? I do like having a sponsor close by, you know what I mean? Like, I like running into my sponsor at a meeting that something wasn't planned and we get to go hang out, you know?
Right. That's interesting. So I think that's part of the exploration. I don't know if we talked about this in the sponsorship episode. We did a sponsorship episode, and I don't even remember if it might have sucked at this point. I have no idea. But just the idea of, I think everybody has a different need to be filled by a sponsor, right? Because I remember my first sponsor, when I first got here, we went to meetings every motherfucking night together. And honestly, we can talk all that. NA says you call your sponsor and reach out for help. That dude called me every goddamn day and told me what meeting we were going to and what time he was picking me up, and I would have never called him. That's the truth. Like, I never even stayed clean. There's no way. And I needed that. And I remember the first time I sat in a meeting and a guy shared about how he had a sponsor like that early on in his time, and then for whatever reason later on it was time to change, and the sponsor he found was not that. And he shared specifically about how it was different, and he just worked steps with his sponsor. That was it. Like, they would call him like once every couple weeks, and then he would work steps with him, and they never hung out. They were not like any kind of people that would even really get along hanging out. And I remember sitting in that meeting like, oh, shit, that's an option too? Like, I've never even thought that was something. Like, what does that do? Like, the concept at that point in time in my recovery was well out of my realm of understanding. And now I see that, like, people need sponsors for different reasons, and they need different things out of the relationship. And definitely early on, there's no way I could have had a sponsor that I didn't see regularly, because I'm not at that point, I was not calling nobody.
Yeah. And I would say my understanding of a sponsor went back to the original sponsorship pamphlet. So there's a newer one. Now it's been out. It's probably been out for 10 years now. So I'm really going to. But there's an older one that had a line in there that my first sponsor told me, and it's what I tell most of my sponsees now. It says, your sponsor is not your marriage counselor, social worker, financial advisor, or taxi driver. They are a guide through the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous.
Right.
On top of that, my wife tends to talk about her description of, the four-legged table in recovery. Like, you build your recovery on 4 legs. One of those is God. One of those is your step work. One of those is your sponsor. And the other one is the fellowship. And that, your fellowship leg is different than your sponsorship leg. They shouldn't be the same person, because if they're the same person and that person uses, then you lose 2 of your legs right away. So that you should have a fellowship leg and a sponsorship leg that are independent of each other.
That's interesting.
I've had both relationships throughout time as I've been clean. So I don't know that one's better than the other, or I mean, I guess if you want to use the God thing, God gives you what you want, or I don't know.
When you had the sponsor that wasn't the buddy, did you not have a buddy at that point in time in your life, or did you still have like a recovery hangout buddy?
So, I mean, that time is probably now, and my previous sponsor at the end of that relationship, because he just stopped going to meetings and shit.
Right.
So, yes, I've always had friends in recovery, but I had the experience that we're talking about where my sponsor was also my best friend, and we fucking hung out all the time. I mean, all the time. And he went through some bad stuff in his life at the same time I was going through some bad stuff in my life, and he basically relapsed and was unavailable, and I was fucked. I was fuck NA, This is how I looked at it. NA had nothing to offer me, and there wasn't anybody that I wanted to talk to in NA at that time. Not outside of that relationship with him. But he had been my best, closest friend plus my sponsor for 9 years, And so when he relapsed, I was like, I didn't really have anyone else I was close to talk about. And this was a time we were going through a pretty big tragedy in our lives. We found out, my daughters were being molested. And at the same time, he's going. So it's not something that you can just openly talk to fucking anybody about, or that I was willing to openly talk to people about, or even openly talk about in meetings. There was a lot of guilt and shame and embarrassment and anger and resentment, all those things that you would want a person that you trust in a one-on-one relationship with, and he wasn't available. So
I feel like the whole point of this episode was to establish when to change sponsors, and now it just seems like the answer is whenever you feel you need to, and we should just shut up. Are we done talking? Is that it?
Thanks for tuning in.
Right. Right. Great week. Have a good week, everybody. No, I mean, so yeah, I guess maybe we start at the complete answer and then go into the details. Maybe the complete answer for when to change sponsors is whenever you feel like you're not getting what you need. And I don't know that doesn't hold true even if you're not really on the up and up, so to speak. Even the person who's got 7 days clean, that's like, oh, my sponsor's not doing shit for me, and this individual is like on that path to using again in 3 days. I mean, does that change the fact that you just change sponsors when you need to change sponsors?
Yeah, so 3 of the times that I changed sponsors were almost by default. my first sponsor was my first sponsor was probably the one that was the hardest because I was the closest with him. I had worked through steps 1 through 6 or 7. I can't remember now, but we had done the 5th step and done all that. And then he was making his way out. And it was fucking painfully obvious to me and everyone else around that he was making his way out of NA and was doing all kinds of crazy shit, going to strip clubs and just this, one step away from using. Wasn't going to meetings, wasn't really doing recovery stuff, but I was like clinging on because I loved the guy. I loved the guy. He'd been my sponsor for 4 or 5 years. We had been through a bunch of steps. We were really close, and I didn't want to see him go. But eventually it just, I needed to move on, just because I needed someone that I saw at meetings, someone I saw living this way of life, and he wasn't doing that anymore, so I made a change.
Jason, do you consider the other time you were here to be recovery? Like, what do you consider that?
Not really.
No?
No, I think I was just here. At the time, I probably did.
Right.
But I think I just fellowshipped more than I used the program. You know what I mean? Like, I was just about having fun and meeting people, and I wanted to be clean. I just I wasn't taking suggestions. I was just trying to be happy. You know what I mean?
Right.
And my idea of happy now is way different than when I initially came around and eventually relapsed. You know what I mean? I wasn't taking suggestions. I wanted the pretty girl and the nice clothes and the nice house and stuff like that. Those were my goals. You know what I mean?
What do you think about changing sponsors then?
So initially I came around and I relapsed, and Jay and I had a conversation about, he pretty much wanted it to be my idea. He gave me this, if you want to see if somebody else has the answers that I'm not giving you, I would invite you to explore those opportunities.
I don't remember saying that.
Yeah, it was something like that. He was
good.
like lobbing it up there for like, it's my idea that I want to change sponsor, but really it was his idea.
And I crack up because my wife says that a lot. She'll talk to people that she sponsors that don't call her or she hasn't talked to in a long time and say, hey, maybe someone... My fucking ego is too big to think, well, I know I could help you. You're just not doing your part.
Yeah.
And I never want to give them that out. Like, that is it's such a kind and humble thing to do, to try to give them that out. And I'm like,
Billy,
nope, I'm fucking going to make you do it.
You got it twisted. Mine's from ego, too. I'm going the Rob Kelly route. If I know it's his fault and he finds another sponsor, I still got 100% success rate.
Right, yeah.
There you go.
But I bit the bait. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get me a new sponsor. It didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work at all.
All right. Okay. Just curious. I didn't know how that went.
Well, and this, I think, goes back a little bit to something I hadn't ever thought a ton about until fairly recently, which you and I had talked about, is like, there's the fellowship and then there's the program, and those are two different things. And really the program,
Absolutely.
the way I've come to understand it, is the 12 steps. Everything else is fellowship. Meetings, hanging out, activities, all that shit is fellowship. And my sponsor is my key to my program, not necessarily my fellowship. So, and that's a fairly, like, say, it's just something I never thought much about. To me, it was always just all encompassing. Like, my program was my fellowship, the steps, my service work, and they were all sort of connected. And I don't know that they are as much anymore. And that comes from just being a person now who has a bunch of balls that I'm trying to juggle up in the air.
I
got
that was going somewhere else.
Kids and activities and, a job, and,
right.
I can't neglect those things, but I can't neglect my recovery. And how do I balance all that out? I can't go to 5 meetings a week. I can't go to every NA activity. I can't show up at everybody's anniversary.
So interestingly enough, Caroline, a couple weeks ago on that grief episode that everybody was talking about enjoying, mentioned the idea that sponsors are like therapists, and I fucking tightened up and cringed when she said it. I was like, don't tell me I just spent all that time in school and we're the same. But to a point that she made, like in therapy, some people do come in and just dump their shit in meeting one, but a lot of times it takes months of that hour a week getting to know each other, right? We got to build rapport. You have to trust me before you're willing to let me in and tell me some of that shit that you've never told anybody. In the same vein of sponsorship, I think not regularly hanging out with your sponsor or spending time around them. Like if I just linked up with my sponsor to go over step work, like I'm not going to have that built up trust and faith in their character as an individual, and that they're going to that they're going to hold my stuff safe, right? So like I get what you're saying. I do think the sponsor is more of like the guide through the program and not so much the fellowship aspect. But without the fellowship, and how do you put your stock in them to tell them that shit?
I have come to understand that my trust in this process of recovery is not in the people. It's in the process and the program. So that sponsor is, I don't want to say a placeholder. I don't mean it that way, because obviously I got to make some judgments when I get a sponsor. I want to do some thoughtful investigation before I just pick any old person to be my sponsor. But my trust is in the program and doing my part, not in necessarily in the individual. Because all the guys that I've had as my sponsors, and that guy that I trusted with my 5th step, and then he went and used, I didn't know he was going to go use when I fucking told him my whole 5th step. You know what I mean? That was the farthest, at that point in my mind, he was fucking clean the rest of his life, and he was always going to be here and more time than me. And at that moment, that's what he was.
The thing I was thinking though, is what you said about your sponsor is just this. He is just there to guide you through the 12 steps, and he's not your financial advisor, and he's not your therapist. I think that's the biggest crock of shit that I've heard.
And they did change the pamphlet, so maybe you're right. Maybe
yeah,
that's why
my
they changed
sponsor
the
was
literature.
all of that. He was my therapist. I told him what was going on in my love life. And I think it's just a kind of an excuse we use so we don't have sponsees asking us for money.
And I honestly don't know that
rides everywhere.
Yeah,
I don't know that it said financial advisor. I think it said banker.
yeah.
Right.
Oh,
so
true.
yeah, I think it was money. That
Oh
they
yeah,
were talking
financial advisor might
remember-
be okay. So banker.
about. Yeah.
I remember when I had like 6 months clean, I pulled up to his house in a brand new truck, and he's like, "You should have talked about this before you did that."
Yeah.
I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "It says don't make no major purchases or something." I don't know where it says that, but
I don't know. I probably made that shit up. But I got a sponsee now that's like job hopping and career changing, and I don't slight him for it. Like, I'm not mad at him or anything, but I do think when I see this kind of stuff that he does on Facebook, I'm like, damn, it kind of would have been nice if we'd have talked about like your motivations for that and why are you doing that. And look, after talking to him, seemed like his motivations were totally 100% in the right place. But like, why not run that by somebody and see if they have any thoughts on it before?
Yeah, see, and as a sponsor, I'm always like, I am only interested in what you want to do about your problem and how I can help. You know what I mean? You want to go create a bunch of chaos in your life? If you talk to me first, we can try to work through it. But if not, once you make the chaos, there's no point of me just judging you and pointing out all your fucking shortcomings. It's how do we get through that and learn and grow from it, I mean, it's just a different way of looking at it.
It's interesting, though, because to Jason's point, I'm kind of with you. Like, I get that my only real job requirement, so to speak, as a sponsor is to help people through the 12 steps. But my goal has always been to help them live a better life than what they were. And if I am a few pages further in the book on how to eat nutritiously or how to manage my money and budget, like, why wouldn't I also share that information with them if they seem to be struggling, right? If I used to struggle with sleeping with every woman I encountered and they're sleeping around and they don't want to anymore, why wouldn't I also, like, it just seems natural.
And I would say for me, the point isn't necessarily that I won't get advice from other people on things. It's that I can't necessarily think that my sponsor is going to have all the answers to all my problems all the time. That first sponsor that I love so much and great guy, and everything that he gave me to build the foundation of my recovery on was great. He's a fucking womanizer, and he ran around cheating on his wife and shit all the time. And I knew that. So there's levels of like dishonesty and lying and manipulation there that, so I didn't go to him for fucking marriage advice, that's for sure. He wasn't my relationship person. But it wasn't like he gave me bad information. Just he wasn't the only source of information for everything.
What did he have that you wanted?
I can't be better than everyone at everything all the time, you know? Like, I can't have all the information for everyone all the time. Yeah.
I think it just shows that different people need different things, and there's no cookie cutter
100%
scenario.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What I need out of a sponsor is completely different than what someone else needs, or even a sponsee needs.
Yeah, and there are those people that are like you said, pick people up and call them and drag them out to meetings, and you need to do this, and that's the opposite of me, but I don't think there's a wrong. I think, like you said, people need that. I mean, we all come in here with different skill sets and abilities and backgrounds and upbringings, and you know.
So has anybody here ever changed a sponsor when there was not any external major change in the relationship?
No.
I don't think I have.
No.
I kind of think I have, but I also didn't at the same time. Like, I had every intention of changing my sponsor. I had been through the 12 steps twice with them, and I just felt it was time to get some new perspective in my life. And I was going to do that before I moved, but then I moved an hour away, and I made the commitment to finish out the 12 with them, and then I switched. But there was the move, right? So I can't say I did it without the major change, but I was going to.
And I've had, I think, 2 guys that I've sponsored through all 12 steps switch. I don't know if that counts as a major, but that's because at the end of the steps, I'm like, all right, do you want to get a new sponsor? Like, now's the time. If you want to switch.
Whoa.
Well, I mean, not that I fire them, but I'm just like, hey, we've went through the steps now. If, I'll go through them again with you if you want. And one of them has stayed with me, and now he doesn't ever call me anymore.
Billy's dangling a shiny necklace.
See,
like, you want a new sponsor.
Yeah, I think that I'm building such a relationship with the sponsor that I just want it to last longer. You know what I mean? I'm looking for, I don't know if that makes sense, but like, I was looking for a friend. You know what I mean? I was looking for somebody with a lot of clean time that knew the program that I could lean on.
But do I need that person to be my sponsor? Or can I just have a friend that I do that?
And that's what I have now, too. That's how it ended up.
Right.
My first time in, I tried to get a girlfriend that had that. I figured it was best of both worlds.
Did you ask a woman to sponsor you?
I did before I got clean, yeah. She had big breasts.
No alternative motives there, right?
Saying. Complete alternative motives. She gave me her boyfriend's phone number. I was so depressed. It's like I'm using tonight.
That's good stuff.
Damn it. That's not
that didn't work the way I thought it would.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was all giving myself credit for like being ballsy and going and talking to her. It did not work.
But it's weird. Like, my needs as a sponsee have flip-flopped over the years. So early on, like, I definitely had to have a sponsor that I saw regularly, like that I saw at meetings, that I hung out with, that I did stuff with. Now it's the opposite of that. And I actually learned that skill, how to do that well, from a guy that I sponsored that lived up here and moved to Florida. And he moved to Florida, and that fucking guy called me and kept more in touch with me than anybody I sponsored up here at all. I talked to him more. We did step work over fucking Zoom before that was even cool. This was like 4 or 5 years ago, and we were doing, it was FaceTime, we would do our step work that way, and we went down to Florida and visited him, and he would visit when he came up. And it just, like, it was like, wow, he really put the fucking work in to make that work. And so as I, got in a point where most recently I had the same sponsor for quite a few years, he kind of stopped coming to meetings. I don't know if we've talked about it on here, but he pretty much just kind of got busy with life, and he went through a divorce and he moved and just kind of stopped doing recovery. I think he's still clean, but he definitely doesn't do any program fellowship stuff. When I started looking for a new sponsor, I realized, that it takes work. And so now my sponsor doesn't live right in this area, but I put in the effort to, like, call him, make time to meet up with him, shoot him a text every, week or two if I don't talk to him. And I try to put that effort in to maintain that relationship. This episode has been brought to you in part by Voices of Hope, Inc., a nonprofit recovery organization made up of people in recovery, family members, and allies. Together, members strive to protect the dignity of those that use drugs and those in recovery by advocating for treatment, harm reduction and support resources, and mentoring. Please visit us at www.voicesofhopemaryland.org and consider donating to our cause.
Is there a certain time when you have to change your sponsor, or is it always a choice? And I think the first thing that pops up in my mind when I ask that is if they use. Right.
Yeah.
If they use, do you have to change them? Yeah.
For
I would
me,
say yeah.
You
I
think
would say
so?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so I'm not disagreeing. I think if somebody presented this question to me, I'm probably suggesting they change sponsors. But I'm thinking about it and going to some other fellowships, right? And these other fellowships, the goal is usually not complete abstinence at all, right? The goal is a progressively better life, right? Whether that's progressively longer times between acting out behavior for sex addicts, or whether that's like increasingly better boundaries in your Al-Anon program. Like, the goal is not really complete abstinence, and nor is relapse looked at as any complete failure of your program. It's like, okay, hey, you were on a good stretch there. You slipped up once. Let's get you back in tune. They don't celebrate clean time as, voraciously. It's not as big of a deal. And in fact, a lot of the sex addict programs, not that there aren't the select few individuals that do get clean from their acting out behaviors and stay that way for years, but most of them, it's like, hey, I put a good 6 months together. Life's been really good. Yeah, I did have this slip, but like now I'm back in. I got 2 more good months. Like, it's just not as structured the way NA is, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And for them, I don't think they would think twice about keeping their sponsor. If the guy acted out, it would be like, okay, so what?
True, but in fairness, it seems like those are more, and I'm guessing because I don't know, but that those are more programs where they're things that you kind of need to do. I mean, like food, you need to eat. So if you're a food addict, you have to try to manage, and that's way hard. Like, I don't know how I could take prescription medication and still try to be in, an abstinence-based recovery program. Like, I know some people can manage that. Fuck, not me, man. I got to be off of everything because I abuse the shit out of anything.
Yeah, that's my worst nightmare.
And yeah, that's mine too, is that I'll get like one of them back injuries or some long-term sustaining injury that I got to take some sort of pain management for. Fuck, dude, I would be so scared to death that would happen. But, like food or sex. I mean, I guess you could abstain from sex for the rest of your life.
Gambling?
But that sounds fucking terrible.
Gambling?
Yeah, I don't gamble.
Interpersonal relationships? I guess that's what Al-Anon deals with.
Well, and I learned more from the sex thing when we talked to people from the different SA and SAA. Like, to me, the sex addiction is always just about the physical act of sex, and apparently there's a lot more to it than just that. So, yeah, that's a little different.
So, and this might not be popular with everybody, but my opinion would be the person who's able to find a healthy relationship and continue to interact with a behavior or substance that they do want to continue with in their life and not completely eliminate, I say they have done more work and gotten way healthier than the person who just never goes near the substance to begin with. I mean, they've done the work to be able to do it, some, and not have that same reaction to it.
Well, I don't have any experience with a lot of the fellowships you just named. I'm programmed complete abstinence. My experience is in NA.
Right.
I'm all about, if my sponsor uses, I'm getting a new one.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I just don't have any experience with those other ones, and it all seems...
Yeah.
They all
made the
seem like
change
reasons.
twice for exactly that reason they used.
Yeah.
So let's get a new sponsor.
So, and I think this looks different. I mean, if your sponsor, fucking shoots meth or something and he goes on, a 3-month bender, yeah, you might not be able to have him sponsor you during that 3 months at least. If your sponsor goes out and decides he has a drink on vacation and says, that's just not the life I want to live. I had 3 drinks while I was in Cancun, whatever, with the wife. We came home. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to start my clean time over. I don't necessarily think that he's lost any information or recovery. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that gets back to the idea of most of life. Like, if you're looking for hard rules, I don't know that you're going to find any hard rules on stuff like, I mean, because I would think that now, like if my sponsor now went to Cancun and had a drink, I don't know that I would fight. If it came back and went right back to what he was doing before me, like, holy fuck, I can't believe I did that. But
I'm getting a new
my
sponsor.
experience has been the ones that have used, they haven't stuck around or come back.
Right.
How you gonna feel at your anniversary though when your sponsor's picking up his 90-day key tag and sponsoring you with 21 years?
Right.
So, and funny,
How does that look?
Yeah, that was one of the things that we just talked about earlier before we started was, like, I've always thought your sponsor has to have more time than you. You know, it's got to be somebody that has more time than you. And recently, I mean, I had 2 issues in our area. The first being there's not that many people that have more time than me, at least that are not actively working a program of recovery in our area here in Cecil County. And I, haven't reached out far beyond this little geographic area to build relationships. I know a handful of people outside of this area. So it was hard to find someone just that had more time than me. But then people that, like, have a lot of time and are actively engaged in a program of recovery. And by that, I mean have a, home group that they go to regularly, go to like events or at least participate in NA shit, that sponsor people that, are active in their recovery program. Like, those are things that I was looking for. In this area, there's not a lot of them. It was a very short list of people that I got to pick from.
I thought the sponsor with less time than you was weird until I ran into it with my sponsor and his sponsor previously, and he had like 2 less years. But I still had this concept, and I think I still do, that your sponsor has to be further along spiritually than you or something like that. Recovery-wise, like there's some measurement that they've got to have more of than you do, even if they've got less time. And I don't really truly believe that, but it's still the idea in my head.
Yeah, I don't agree with either one of that.
Really?
I think once you get so far along in recovery, 10, 15 years, if you meet somebody with that same time, you still have a lot to offer each other. I know when you were shopping for a sponsor, like I was like, why don't you have this guy be your sponsor? And you were like, we're too close in time, age, but you got like 17 years clean.
Right.
And he's got 18. What's the difference? You still have a lot to offer each other. And I didn't understand at the time. And I still feel the same way. I think that once you get 15, 20 years clean, you meet somebody like used to. If I didn't know who's sponsor, I would totally believe that he is your sponsor or vice versa. Because you guys have a lot of clean time and both have a lot of different views and things to offer each other. So I think it could work either way.
Yeah, and see, as a sponsor, I'm definitely looking for the person that is spiritually on, I feel like, in a different place than me. I don't know, further's a bad way to look at it, I believe. Because now I picked my sponsor that I have now based on he does a lot of things that I don't do or wasn't doing. I'm getting better at them now, but he's like with 30 plus years clean, he's very enthusiastic about the program, still going to 4 or 5 meetings a week, sponsors a fucking ton of guys, does a bunch of sponsor family ship stuff, like,
oh, he's totally not recovering.
just really engaged. You know what I mean? Like right now, he's fully immersed in NA. If you go over to Harford County, like, everybody knows who he is. They see him around. He's not the guy that fucking only shows up at his home group and nobody knows who the fuck you're talking about.
I hope I'm that way at 30 years clean.
Yeah.
Oh, he's great.
And so
He's
that
great.
is very, like, that was very appealing and attractive to me, to be like, that is someone who is in a different spiritual place with their program than I am. Because I was to the point where I'm like, I'm good. It's like a maintenance thing. I show up at my home group once a week. I might hit an event here and there just to say hi to some old friends, but I'm good.
Now you're
Good.
describing me. Stop.
And so, yeah, that's me. I'm that. And so I looked for something different than that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that goes along with what I said, that he thinks about things so much different than I do. You know what I mean? Why would you want a sponsor that thinks just like you? How's that going to bring something new to the table?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think that's why, and that's where my brain struggles sometimes to wrap its head around it, because we say we want to pick a sponsor that has what we want, right? And I guess that doesn't necessarily state we can't also already have that too. Like we could pick a sponsor at the same level that we're like, yeah, those things in him are attractive. I also have those things in him, right? Like that's why I always think of this like they need to be on this other level or something. Like it's if they don't have what I want, or if I already have what they have, why would they be a good sponsor? Don't they have to be somewhere further along for me to
Something
aspire?
different to the table, I think.
Just something different.
Yeah, something different for sure. And see, I've had a sponsor that was like a Buddhist, and then my sponsor before this one was very Christian, like Jesus Christian-y, which was difficult, you know. And again, I picked him because it was just different. Like I knew that was an area that I was lacking, that I struggled in, a faith and belief in a higher power.
Well, that
and
shit
he
didn't
seemed
work.
to be very locked in with his, you know.
I don't think it helped. I'm
Him or
I'm not
me?
in a bad way. You,
Oh.
I don't think you got closer to Jesus because he was your sponsor.
No,
If that's what you picked
not
him
at
for.
all. No, I didn't pick him to get. Again, when I think I said this to Jason earlier, I don't pick them because I want to necessarily be like them. I pick them because I want to be open-minded and I want to explore new ideas and see if, you know, like if I just have my ideas in and of themselves are inherently not good for me. But if I can measure them and balance them against other ideas, I can see if they're really good or really not so good. I mean, with Time Clean, you do start to develop some level of, you know, ability to think for yourself and have rational thought and not be a complete fucking idiot, you know? So I just can't necessarily trust all my ideas. I still need...
Is this a sure fact for everyone with clean time? I'm just curious.
So you just made me think about, like, why did I pick Jay as my sponsor? And then as I sat here and listened to you, and I sat here and thought about it, like, I didn't pick him. I asked the guy to sponsor me. I was like 30 days out of treatment, and I asked the guy to sponsor me, and he told me no. He's like, he said, I got a business and I got a boat that I just bought. No bull. And he's like, I got a ton
Mike.
of... That's who it was. Wow. And he was like, I got a ton of sponsees. And he said, I just don't have time for you. I'd be doing you injustice. And he says, go ask that guy over there. And I had seen Jay a few times, but I'd never spoken to him. And like, it would be great if I could sit here and tell you, oh, I picked him because, you know, he was honest and, you know, he had all these great characteristics. He was a great dad and all. But these are just things that I found out later. Right. Initially, I picked him because some guy in the meeting told me no. Now, I truly believe in my heart that was God putting somebody in my life and doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, you know. I truly believe that. But it'd be a lie if I told you, you know, I picked him because of all of his great, you know, characteristics, but because I didn't. Those were things I learned later on down the road, you know.
I'm glad Mike redeemed himself with the have a lot of sponsees and shit.
Yeah.
The business in the boat, I was like, whoa. God damn.
Dude, I like my weekends, man. Fuck off.
And he's a good guy. He was being honest, you know.
Yeah.
So is there any other reason besides using that you would think is a necessity? Like there's a rule where if a sponsor does this, you need to move on. Neglects you, maybe? Like they don't fucking answer your calls for a certain amount of time or something? Or?
I mean, I haven't had this experience, but I've heard horror stories of sleeping with each other's wives or sponsees sleeping with sponsors' wives or vice versa.
You're going to make me tell this story, ain't you?
I was wondering if it was going to come out.
I mean, I would say there's some interpersonal boundaries there that, like, you know.
All right, podcast world. So I got a sponsor.
I don't know this story, so I don't think I'm setting you up for this.
I think you do know this story.
Oh, do
maybe
I?
you don't.
Maybe you did tell me.
So I got a sponsor when I first got here. I was clean. I was working steps. I was hitting a lot of shit ton of meetings. I just wanted to feel better still, though, and I was still acting from a place of instant gratification. I still lived in a place, which I did for a long time after this, too, of the jokingly flirting with pretty much every woman as like a possible in to sleeping with them. And same behavior around my sponsor's wife. And then one day she called me out of the blue and was like, hey, you know, he goes to work at this time at night, stopped down a little after that. And I convinced myself I was going there because I couldn't hurt her feelings on the phone. I was just going to go and in person explain why I couldn't, even though I wanted to. And that is definitely not what happened when I got there.
Right.
And we slept together, and it came out like 6 months later. And then, hurt people. My sponsor shared my fourth step with my current girlfriend and tried to sleep with her, and maybe did. I don't know at this point. I have no idea, but it was a disaster. And one of those things that I hoped I would never do again, and it was a learning experience, I guess. I don't know. It's pretty cruddy,
But,
if we want to look at it.
did you honestly feel like, yeah, I think I want to keep that guy as a sponsor?
No, we were definitely done as a sponsor.
Right.
Yeah, that's a reason to change sponsors.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
that's
we were
definitely-
hitting meetings together every night. We were working together every day, like on the same little crew at work. I mean, he did have the, like recovery, I guess, to pull me up at work and tell me he found out. Like, thought that was kind of, it hurt, but it was like kind of nice that he was able to do that. And then like 3 days later, he took a shit in my Rubbermaid lunchbox.
All right, you're even.
And I still couldn't blame him for that.
Right,
It was
right.
like, okay, I get it. So yeah, I mean, I would say, and I was going to ask if either of you guys have been fired, because that's, I guess, one of those times I was fired. I'm assuming
As a sponsor?
as
I've
a,
been
as
fired
a sponsee.
I have.
I've not been fired as a sponsee.
You been fired as a sponsee?
Yeah, Jack cut me loose.
Did he?
Yeah.
Ooh,
Huh.
that stings.
If I wasn't high, I probably would have hurt my feelings.
I got fired in a different program because I told the guy that my plan was I wasn't ever going to interact with this one female again. And when the moment came, I didn't find myself capable of doing that. And he was like, "You lied to me. I can't sponsor you anymore."
Ooh.
And I was like, "Bro, I didn't lie. I told you what I want to be my truth. I just didn't feel capable when it happened." And he was like, "Nope." I
Patty.
was like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah." I had a therapy session about that motherfucker. And my therapist kind of sided with him. I was
Really?
like, not really. She didn't really side with him, but she helped me to see some other perspective. And I think I'm still bitter. That's why.
So if you're changing sponsors, so I've always felt an obligation to let my previous sponsor know that I was
Yes.
getting a new sponsor. But this last time, I didn't. I mean, the guy hasn't been to fucking meetings in like 2 years.
Well,
Do
there you
I
go.
owe him a fucking...
there's a behavior
call?
that you got to fire your sponsor over if he doesn't tell his last sponsor that he's leaving him. Now I got to
Yeah.
let you go, Billy.
That's funny. The proper etiquette for getting a new sponsor. Because I go, like, everything I say and do with sponsees is 100% what my sponsor did with me. You know what I mean? So my sponsor was like, let your sponsor know before you get a new sponsor. Like, look, I'm going to get a new sponsor. And then I see guys that do the opposite. They're like shopping for sponsors, ask someone to sponsor them before they let their sponsor know. And I told a guy that I was like, man, I think you're doing that backwards. He was like, well, you don't quit a job before you find a new one. And I kind of understand his point.
Yeah.
You know,
What if
Kind
he
of.
says no?
But
right?
to defend myself in this case, so my sponsor didn't come to my last anniversary. He hasn't been to a meeting in 2+ years. He's missed other sponsee brothers' anniversary. Like, he's actively fucking left the
You
fellowship.
need a sponsor.
It's not like he's at another meeting that I might run into him next week and be like, oh, by the way. And I probably would. If I ran into him at a meeting, I'd be like, hey, great to see you. By the way, I got it. But I'm not going to fucking track him down like he's... I mean, I could. It wouldn't be a big deal. But so I got that from talking with someone else who had a similar situation and said they went through the efforts to track down their old... kept calling and all that stuff. And finally, their old sponsor said, look, would you just leave me alone? I don't want to do that anymore. That's why I'm not coming to meetings and not doing any of that. Fucking please just leave me alone. And I thought, ow, I don't want to hear that. My
Don't you
feelings
deserve-
get hurt.
Why not just say that, though? Don't you deserve that? I feel he should just tell you in the beginning before he abandons you.
Right.
Hey, get a new sponsor because I'm not programming anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's weird. I mean, I don't know. Again, not in this case of what I know, I don't know that it was an active, like, one day he woke up and said, I'm not doing NA anymore. It was like he went through his divorce, and then he moved kind of out to a fairly rural area that's outside of It would take them, and this is an excuse because you could still do it, but it would take them like a half hour, 45 minutes one way to get to a meeting, even on the closest nights. To get out to where our home group was would have been like an hour from where he was. And again, you could do those things, but I think it's just a natural progression of, well, now I'm way out here and it's not
Right.
so convenient, and now I'm dating people that aren't in recovery, and, and so it just slowly happened over time because he still sponsored me, and we went over step work at a time where he wasn't really actively going to meetings, but I could tell it was, going south.
So I'll give you a little reprieve for that, but I still think there's like, shoot a text message, leave a voicemail. Like, you don't even have to talk to him direct because you're right. He's kind of going. I get it.
Yeah.
But,
But
send
my
him
other
a- send him a
sponsors, I've always
postcard.
felt like it was an obligation to tell them, to let them know
yeah.
out of just respect or whatever.
Yeah, it depends on your respect level.
I don't think the order matters.
Now, if they
I don't
use
care
and
about
aren't
that.
around, are you supposed to
I don't
track them
anymore.
down? Like,
If they're getting high, no, I'm not going to go find them.
No, that speaks for itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. But I don't give a fuck about I don't care if you tell your sponsor, "Hey, I'm going to switch sponsors. I need to let you go. I love you." And then get the sponsor, or if you get the sponsor to make sure that they can and then tell it. Like, I don't think it matters.
So what I did was I talked to my new sponsor. I just said, "Are you available for sponsorship?" And then we had that conversation. And then I said, "Well, I want to have a conversation with my sponsor before we make the commitment."
I was still in the middle of writing step 11 when I talked to my new sponsor, and I was like, "Hey, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get you to sponsor me. I'm just going to finish up these 12 first." So in the same idea of that, should you talk about you're thinking about getting a new sponsor with your current sponsor? Like, would it be a helpful and useful tool to say, "Hey, spons, I don't know, I've been feeling like this isn't working out so well anymore," or, maybe when I finished at 12, I was thinking maybe I'd like get some other direction. What do you think about that? Is that useful?
I think it definitely could be, depending
Yeah.
on your sponsor's attitude with things. You know what I mean? If you got a good sponsor, I think it's definitely valid.
well, it's like any healthy relationship. I mean, it's just like a breakup relationship.
Right.
Like, do you ride it till the fucking thing
Wheels fall off? Yeah.
Right. if
crashes
you don't-
into a flaming pile of
Yeah,
shit?
if you got
or
somebody
do
you don't want to talk to anyway, why am I going
Right.
to share extra information with you?
And most of the time that sponsees have fired me, it's never been like, "Oh my God, I don't know where that came from." It's been like somebody that wasn't really calling me or using me anyway. And
Yeah.
and I've had the awkward thing of guys not telling me that I wasn't their sponsor anymore, and then hearing through rumor that they got a new sponsor. That's always awkward. But
Really?
usually
Anybody you were close to?
huh?
Anybody you were actually like close to and working with?
Somewhat.
Huh.
I'll tell you who later.
I hear you.
But yeah, it's as being fired as a sponsor, you usually can kind of tell that it's not really working so
Yeah.
well.
I'm picturing being in the middle of writing step 10, and you go to your sponsor and you're like, "Hey man, I'm in the middle of 10. I was just thinking maybe when I finish up these 12, I'll, get some new perspective from somebody else, so-and-so or whatever." And they're like, "Yeah, you're fired."
That'd be hard to deal with.
That would be
Yeah.
fucked. I don't know. I think if you think you
Yeah,
can't
that's
tell
a
your
shitty
sponsor,
Yeah.
right? If you think
Yeah.
you can't tell your sponsor already, you might want to reevaluate if you have the best sponsor in NA.
Yeah, if you got
Yeah.
sponsors working on shit, then he should be okay with that.
I mean, and that's exactly my attitude of saying that to people when they complete 12. Like, hey, maybe you're looking for some new perspective or looking for somebody that's got something different to offer. Like, now's a good time that you're starting back at the beginning. Now would be a great time.
And
to
there's my
explore that
ego.
idea.
I'm like, I've grown the whole time I was sponsoring you. I have new shit for you.
Yeah.
And I think so. And so you talked about the whole sponsor for life idea, Jason. And I was thinking the same thing originally in my life. I was like, I'll get one guy. He'll continue to grow and stay ahead of me, and I'll continue to grow and learn from him. And that is not my experience whatsoever.
No.
Yeah.
That is
People
not
grow
my-
and that is in the literature, doesn't it say? People grow at different rates and different
Yeah.
something it says, and and that's definitely true.
Well, and I think this is kind of universal for people's recovery, but we go through periods of like intense or more, viable growth. And then we go through periods where we kind of sit with that growth and see what it feels like until we learn what else pops up that isn't growth yet. Right. And so, I mean, if you're in a period of working your 12 steps, your sponsor's kind of in a period of like kicking back, not working as hard on steps, just learning himself some more. That doesn't mesh up at the end of those 12, right? Like that ends up where you feel like, I don't want to say healthier than your sponsor, but in a place where they can't really help you much.
Yeah.
So I was just sitting here thinking what's funny is I have definitely had times in my recovery where it probably would have been a major benefit if my sponsors would have fired me as a sponsee, said, hey, I don't think I'm really doing you a service. I think you should find another sponsor, or whatever nice way you say that. I've never fired a sponsee ever. And only because I got that from one of my previous sponsors, said, I'm here to help people when they want to get help. If they don't want to do nothing, that's on them. If they want to work, I'm here to help them. And, I don't fire sponsees. So I've always hung on to that because it's easy, it's lazy, and it doesn't require me to make any awkward conversation. So it's perfect. Fits.
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah, a guy asked me to sponsor him, and then like a few months later, he told me he was on maintenance. And I said, I was not the guy for him. I said, there are there's somebody out there for you, but I'm not him.
Did you work any steps with him or anything?
We didn't go over any steps, but I had him working the first step.
And what was the theory? I don't want to dig in too much to this.
My program is a program of complete abstinence. I thought that he could truly benefit somebody who come from maintenance background. I've never been on maintenance. I don't have a lot of experience with it. I thought he could truly benefit from somebody who come from maintenance to clean. You know what I mean?
And I could definitely see that. I don't have that experience either, but I would hope they would talk to me about that before they asked me to sponsor him, because then we could have that conversation and say, hey,
I was kind of hurt a little bit that he waited so long to tell me.
But that's sad because it just points out the shame that people have coming in on maintenance.
Yeah. Well, we tell them not to talk in our home groups, so.
Yeah.
How they gonna feel welcome and open to talk about it?
They're not listening yet.
Maybe. So did you talk to him and his plan was to stay on that for the rest of his life, or?
We talked about it. I actually like referred a few guys. I was like, talk to this guy about it. I know he's got some experience with being on the program and detoxing proper. There's not a lot of those people. I don't know a lot of those people, but there's a handful of them that I know that actually was on maintenance and literally detoxed the way the doctor said and lived a clean life with NA. So I pushed a few of those guys in his direction. You know what I mean? So I tried to help him the best I could.
I sponsored a guy that was on Suboxone at one point, who I said, and this was, dude, early on in the Suboxone shit. Like, I didn't even understand what it was at this point. And I was like, oh, he said, my doctor gave me Suboxone. It's supposed to help with not using. I was like, oh, I've never heard of it. I was like, well, how long do you use it for or whatever? Like, I don't know how it works. And he's like, I don't know. I'll ask my doctor the next time I go. And so we were hitting meetings and shit, and he went back to his doctor, and he came back. He's like, my doctor said you don't come off of this. You just stay on it for life.
Huh.
And I was like, what? Like, I'd never heard of this shit at the time. This was, I don't know, 2006, 7, something like that.
That's
8
great.
maybe. I know. I'm shocked. So I mean, now I would probably work steps with somebody on Suboxone. I don't give a fuck at this point. Yeah.
You would?
But back.
I mean, I'd have that honest conversation and say I don't have that experience. I don't know much about it. All I can tell you is from an abstinence-based perspective, because that's how I live, and that's.
Well, I'm just looking back at even before, like, changing my mind about that. I probably would have held a pretty strict, we can't work steps till you're clean or whatever by NA's definition.
Yeah.
But I can still sponsor you, and we can do other shit. Like, you can read on pamphlets and write
I
on
would do
them.
that too.
Like, we
But
just
I
can't
know
work
it says in the
steps.
first page of the step guide, once we become abstinent from all drugs, then we begin to work steps.
Well, and this is. I don't think it's breaking anonymity because I'm not saying any names.
Except
I've
caffeine.
sponsored some people on fucking psych meds that they might as well have been high as fuck because you know what I mean. The lack of So I don't know if I want to even say this now.
Ooh.
Now we want to hear.
There
Right.
is
It's all
an
more
emotional disconnect that happens with
Dissociation.
people that are on certain psych meds. That when you do step work with someone who's not on medication and someone that is, it's a clear, like it's obvious. As you know, I've done a lot of first steps with a lot of people, and a lot of first couple steps with a lot of people,
And very few 12 steps with anybody.
Yeah, and very few 12 steps. I think three.
Wow.
How many first steps would you say you've done? I know I'm interrupting, but how many
Oh,
first
God.
steps? 100? Like literally 100?
Probably 100. Yeah,
Holy fuck. And
That's
only
crazy
3
numbers.
12 steps.
but
3%
yeah,
success rate.
I mean, so again, but
That's
that
what they
goes
say,
back
right?
to these are people that I would never in a fucking million years tell them they needed to come off their psych meds that they go to their psychiatrist for. I'm not a doctor. I don't know your mental illness. I don't want to be responsible for any of that shit. But they're in the program and they're clean, and I mean, I don't think they're not. I just, they're definitely on a medication that hinders their ability to have that spiritual, emotional connection that I experience through the 12 steps. And so, I don't know. We all have different reasons, different things we're looking for in a sponsor. Like to say that I necessarily go out and look for a sponsor that has, like at this point in my life, maybe I'm wrong, but I look for more spiritual things. I'm not looking for material things from a sponsor. I don't really care if they're married and have kids and have a house and all that shit, where those were things that were really important early in my recovery. Like I wanted a sponsor that was, married and had a family and knew how to do those things, because that's where I was at in my life. Now that's not so important to me to have in a sponsor.
How old were you?
What, when I got clean?
Yeah.
26.
And you wanted like marriage, and like that was the last fucking thing I wanted my sponsor. I wanted a sponsor that
yeah.
like slept with a lot
Dude,
of women.
I always wanted a
and
bunch
had a
of
nice
kids.
car.
So that was my
Money.
life using that. No, not the nice car, but
Yeah.
I just slept around and had no long-lasting relationships, and that was my whole life.
I wanted to
So
look
when I
good
came
and
in,
have
I was
money.
like, all I wanted to do was
co-signing
like
my bullshit.
settle down and get married and have a family and be a fucking normal person.
I mean-
not be the train wreck that I was.
I wanted them to be like clean and share really good too, but I didn't necessarily care if they were like had a great family life.
Well, I think by default, your first sponsor is always someone that shares really good, because that's what makes them appealing.
Right.
Oh wow, listen to them.
Well, I think in
wanna
the
be that.
beginning you're just getting somebody. For me, I was just getting somebody. I didn't know. I didn't shop. I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it.
And see, that's what's interesting when Billy said like he was thinking through getting his most recent sponsor and all these factors. And I think it ties into what you just said about what we are looking for in our sponsor originally is also kind of what motivates us to change sponsors, right? And so to tie that stuff together, I do think what we want changes over time, right? The
Definitely.
healthier we get, the longer we're here, we're looking for something else. If our sponsor no longer fits that bill, if he hasn't grown in that direction, not to say that he hasn't grown, but if he hasn't grown in that direction that we're looking for now or that we're interested in, yeah, I guess it is maybe time to, reevaluate that situation. But you mentioned thinking a lot about the factors around your sponsor, and I tend to, not that there isn't some background thought on like, does this fit? Is the situation good? And that kind of stuff. But I think I'm more guided by feel, which I guess is like a universal power, higher power kind of deal. Like I think I'm like guided to the vibe. And I can think, oh, well, there's just as many reasons this won't work as it will. But if that vibe is telling me that's where I need to be, or that's where I don't need to be, like I didn't leave my last sponsor because I thought he was a bad guy or wasn't there for me. I left because the vibe felt like this just isn't right anymore. And so I don't think as much.
And my last sponsor, or my current sponsor, I totally picked for all intellectual reasons. We didn't really have a great relationship. We knew each other because we've both been around a long time and had seen each other at meetings and heard each other share, but we weren't really friends. We didn't even know each other that well. And I was like, hey, will you be my sponsor? He said, yeah. And then we've built that relationship from there. And now we get along really well. But it was I guess there wasn't really much feel that went to it. It's like, here's a guy that's doing a bunch of things that I want. I see and I'm getting to that point in my life. So my kids are older now. I have a lot more free time. I can get to more meetings. I can be more engaging in my program. 5-10 years ago, I had 3 kids that were young and sports and shit going on. I didn't feel like I had that level of time, but now I do. And, for those intellectual reasons, I picked him, and it's great. We get along great. But I've put in effort. He puts in effort. We meet in the middle, and,
Pre-pandemic, I was sponsoring like 9 dudes or something like that. And I had this little list, keep track, don't want to forget nobody. I'm down to, I think, 2, maybe. I'm not even sure. I'm sure about 1.
Not very
Completely
many
sure.
new people ever ask me to sponsor them because I tell them, oh, I'm not the guy that's going to be your babysitter. I'm not that guy. If that's what you need, that's fine, but that's not me.
I think I'm scared to take on sponsees now. Not that I wouldn't take on, like nobody's asking, which is I'm thankful for, but I feel like I'm in a place where I'm so unsure of my attachment to 12-step. I don't know. I
All
say
this
that
therapy's done wrecked your brain.
it has. No, well, look, here's the crazy thing. I say that I'm not so sure, and yet I just signed up to get voted in for a year-long commitment that starts in August. So, I mean, obviously, I'm at least stuck for another year.
Well, this is off this topic completely, but there's nothing wrong with questioning. I questioned my commitment, my reasoning for being in Narcotics Anonymous for a long time.
I question if it's the place I can be of the most value and service. That's what I question. I don't know that it's any longer the place where I can be the most helpful to the most people. So I'm not sure. But I'm stuck for at least 14 months.
And I wish I could say mine's the whole other selfish reason. Like, this is the place where I feel like I get the most out of it. So
That's funny.
I grow the most spiritually being here, I feel like. So.
Well, see, I've been taking
Or in NA. I shouldn't say here.
the lessening of sponsees through the pandemic. I was like, oh, that's a sign. That's because they have to move on from me because it's my time to do something else.
Gosh, see, and I've maintained this about the same amount. I usually sponsor about 5 to 6 guys at any one time. They trickle in and out and stop calling for a while and disappear. New ones fill in. It's usually about the same amount.
So what is the ultimate idea of when you change sponsors? Is it just when you feel like it? Like,
I struggle with knowing when to change sponsors. You know what I mean? Like I said, I hemmed and hawed over for a few months in my head and prayed on it for a long time. I think that's an important thing to figure out is like being aware is important. Being aware to realize that you need a new sponsor. I struggled with it.
Hopefully you have some peers or some people that you respect their recovery. Talk to them about it. Like most things, me making decisions by myself usually isn't the best. I usually should seek out some advice from other
did do
people.
that a little
Maybe
bit.
if it's not directly my sponsor, because that could be fucking awkward. I'm going to have some people that I can, bounce some ideas off of, share some stuff. Because sometimes it might just be me. Sometimes it may be I need to recommit to that relationships. And other times it might be, yes, it's definitely time to move on, so.
yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When I told you that I wanted a new sponsor, how did that grab you?
This
It always hurts. It always feels right like a punch in the
Was
gut.
it
Program of
right out
honesty.
of left field? Did you not see it coming? That sort of thing.
I didn't totally see it coming, but it also wasn't a complete shock, I guess, is where I was at with it, right? It was kind of.
Did you feel like we had grown apart a little bit with the move?
I felt like our physical contact had ended. I don't feel like the growing apart was NA stuff, if there was any growing apart. I think I did recognize that we had some different values outside of. I guess they're not really.
But that always
outside
was
of
the
NA.
case, and I never had a problem with that.
It was, but I felt like, and partly from my experience through the pandemic of having to go through this place where I was kind of frustrated with some of the world, to get to a place on the other side of that, I felt like that made it difficult for people who had other beliefs around me. And I don't know what that experience was like for them. I just tried to imagine what it was like for them. So I don't know, but yeah, of course there's always a sting to it, right? And that's that ego piece of like, who the fuck could do this better than I can, right? And then there's the judgment of the new sponsor. Like, don't even tell me who it is.
Oh, see, for me, it's always the I'm not good enough. Oh,
I thought I was like, yeah, I'm in a pretty good place with that. And then you said something earlier in this episode, and I was going to ask you a question, but I'm going to ask you after, because I don't want you to have to say it on here. But I was like, damn, that's kind of a resentful question. That's not nice. So it's interesting.
Like all of these things that you're saying is like all the entire reason why I struggled, because like these are all feelings that were inevitable that I did not want him to experience. You know what I mean? Like he was my sponsor. You know what I mean? Like I cared about him. I didn't want him to feel like, in no sort of way, and it'd be my fault. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is probably my self-centered and shit again, but.
Well, and I think a lot of that goes back to our society's view of the world, right? That pain is bad and that it's wrong, and we don't want to avoid it at all costs. And like, I don't think that's the case. I think it's very human to think, man, I don't want somebody to feel these negative emotions, but at the same time, like that's my shit to deal with, right? Don't hold your program up over things that I need to learn to adapt to. Like that's stuff I need in my life.
And now I think like I can totally grow further with two people than I can with one person. You know what I mean? When I first got clean, I wanted to be the guy with one clean date. You know what I mean? I thought that was so cool, and I wanted to keep one sponsor forever, and I wanted to have one home group forever. Like,
raised on sports.
That was my goal. You know what I mean? And obviously, I got a new clean date, new sponsor, and I do still have the same home group. But there was another reason that I thought about changing to home groups too, because we had an old home group member, and like I remember every time we would go out, she would have friends. Like she would always know a ton of people. I'm like, man, a ton of people. She was like, had a lot of different home groups. You know what I mean? I think it helps you because there's that bond with a home group member. You know what I mean? I see old home group members. It doesn't matter what part of town, and if we used to be home group members, like I make it a point to go say hi to them.
I think you've had more relationships that way staying at one home group than you would if you'd have been in 12.
True. Our home group has turned over a lot of times.
Yeah.
We
a
were
lot of turnover in Dundalk. A lot of resentments.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you looked at our home group pre-pandemic, it's completely different. I think we maybe have 3 or 4 people that are still the same.
Right.
We've changed venues. We changed formats. Like everything's different.
There's been a lot of people that stop by that home group just passing through. Like,
yeah.
A whole lot.
Yeah. But we did have a point in time. Do you remember we took a group photo and then we looked at I think it's still like my cover photo on my Facebook page. And I remember looking at it like a year later and me and you talking about like, I can't believe that there's only one person in this picture that's not still there.
Yeah.
So we did have like very small turnover for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tricky one. But you said more than one person. I'm like, should you have 2 sponsors? Is 2 sponsors better than 1 sponsor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that, but I just know that I can get further with 2 people than I can with 1.
Well, and from an outside perspective, I just think like maybe your relationship, you guys, the 2 of you, that relationship is better served as a friendship versus a sponsorship relationship. I mean, to me, sponsorship relationship puts a little bit of a weird, different expectation,
which is why I couldn't ask the guy he was talking about
twist
asking.
on things. I think that puts a relationship in a different category. And having the best friend sponsor relationship for me, having that experience was not good. It wasn't overly healthy.
Yeah, I get the like standoff vibe from you. Like there's been a few things you said that like, man, I would not want him to be my sponsor. That's not what I'm looking for. And obviously nothing against your program or whatever. But there's been 3 or 4 things I was like, I would not want my sponsor to do that. You know what I mean? Like I said, I like the camaraderie between another guy and hanging out and being friends and all the stuff that it says that sponsorship is not. Those are all the things that I really yearn for.
Right.
Well, the new one's different. The new sponsorship pamphlet changed, and it doesn't say that. But it's one of those. It's just like and I try to let go of some of that shit. But it's like the old sit down and shut up and stick the cotton in your, take it out of your ears and shove it in your mouth and all that shit. Like, we don't say that shit to people anymore.
Right.
Some people still try to hang on to that old hard ass
And-
way of thinking, and I don't know that it's necessarily helpful.
Yeah.
It's just it gets stuck in you, you know.
And some of the other things that was surprising, that now me and him have, separate paths for a while now. Some of his views have changed.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's kind of surprising, and like, hey, these are the views that made me like you. do I still like you? Nah, just kidding.
Yeah, it's so it's interesting. I guess we go as best we can. We try to get in tune. For me, my idea of recovery is that we try to get in tune with our mind, body, and spirit. We try to align those three, and we try to use them to reach this place of like inner truth that speaks to us with what we need to do in life. And then we follow that guide. And it is going to be confusing of, do I change or not at times? But I think when the time is right, we are going to know, right? That part of us that just knows is going to know, and we're going to have to do something about it. And even when it's difficult and even when it hurts feelings, we just got to do what's right for our recovery, because to stay with somebody that is not helping you further your recovery is dangerous. I truly believe that.
Yeah, and I would just like to say, sponsorship like that, anyone that's ever sponsored me and given freely of their time, of their life, taken their energy and devoted it to me and my well-being just for the sake of being a nice person, deserves a certain level of like respect and appreciation,
I'm grateful
no
for
matter
that.
what. So if we do need to get rid of sponsors or change sponsors, that gratitude and respect and admiration should still be there in that process of letting them go.
That's like the idea of writing your divorce paperwork up on your wedding day, right? Like the idea of like, make these decisions when you're happy that you're going to commit to doing it this way, instead of when you have this resentment about something your sponsor said about how you cheated on your wife or something. All right. So get yourself a good goddamn sponsor. If you're not in a 12-step program, get yourself a guide, right? A spiritual guide.
Yeah,
of
spiritual
some
advisor is
sort
a word I've heard
in your
people
life.
throw around.
Just somebody to help you, man. Somebody that's got some stuff that you want and that can help you further your life and give you suggestions for how they got there. And beyond that, everybody take care and we'll see you next week. Did you like this episode? Share it with people you think might get something out of it. Check out the rest of our episodes at recoverysortup.com. Also, while you're there, you can find ways to link up with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, anything. We're always looking for new ideas. Got an idea you want us to look into? Reach out to us.